Welcome, everyone. And thank you so much for being here. We've got panelists, we've got live presenters, we've got listeners. And for all of you that are listening to this recording, thank you for taking the time to be here. My name is Krista Berry. I am a nonprofit advocate. That's my new title. And I'm also grateful to be a strategic partnerships lead with the Luna Experience. I'm really, really excited to be able to be having this conversation with our guests and with all of you as listeners. At Luna, our whole mission is to help nonprofits with their growth, to connect with other professionals, and lead with purpose. And honestly, there's no topic closer to that mission than fundraising. Am I right? Because when organizations like yours have the resources that you need, real change happens. And we're talking about real communities here. We're talking about real people doing real work in real hard times. Let's be real. This is the real Fundraising Honest Hour. We're getting real with everyone. So join us in your realness. I wanted to just get up a little bit of context on what we're talking about. And then I'm going to turn it over and have a wonderful discussion with our guest speakers. What the data is telling us right now is that charitable giving actually in the US reached over $592 billion, folks, in 2024. Our data is usually a year and a half behind. We're going to hear what happened in 2025 in the next month. So stay tuned for those updates. For the first time in years, that actually outpaced inflation, if you think about it. So we're in a time in the US where people are being generous. Generosity is real. It's growing. While that's good news, there's also some tension, right? Individual donors, unfortunately, are declining. The numbers are declining. While the dollars are going up, the number of people that are giving are going down. Government funding has been super disruptive for more than 1 in 3 nonprofits. So you probably are representing that just in this room today. And we've seen a lot of foundation support, not only step up, but also really, they can't just be that backdrop. They can't fill the entire gap that the loss of donors giving and federal dollars have created for us. So while foundations are stepping up, we can't see that as our only option. So organizations, they have to kind of figure out how to build diversified, relationship-centered fundraising right now. It's where the genuine advantage is. And that's exactly why we're here today. We've got 2 experts to talk to us that are working with nonprofits on the ground, in the field, and that have been also doing this work for a long time and have seen the arc of our sector so that we can give you some real practical tips to help you leave today. So we don't have any polished decks. We're going to try to stick away from jargon terms today. We just want to have an honest conversation with organizations like yours, and to give you tips on how to really do this work and continue to do meaningful work. So without further ado, Glenn Koffold is the co-founder and managing partner of Luna Experience. He's spent his entire career in purpose-driven work, from Boston University to Fenway Health to Miami-Dade College Foundation, and he's built his life around the belief that community involvement isn't optional, it's essential. Glenn, thank you for inviting me. I'm like so glad you're here, but also
I'm glad you're here too.
And Andrea Ortega is our other guest, founder and CEO of both Palante Nonprofits and Philo Fund. Philo Fund. It's a consulting agency and donor intelligence platform, both built with the same conviction that nonprofits in every size deserve the tools and strategies they need to thrive. So Andrea, I know you're busy, you're at a conference today. Thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's just jump in. We've got a smaller group today, and so we're gonna kind of lead this very much like a podcast. Before I start kind of jumping into the questions on where we're at, would you both like to say something about why you're here and why this topic resonated for you? Glenn, I'll start with you.
Well, that's a really big question. I think so much is in flux. in the nonprofit world right now. Certainly at the federal level, and I know a lot of our guests here today are in Florida, and things are rapidly happening in Florida. And the sector is changing before our eyes, and not necessarily in good ways. But I don't remember who it was who said, never let a good crisis go to waste. And so I think this is a moment for every nonprofit leader to really be thinking differently about everything, but especially fundraising. Because in many places we're seeing diminished government funding. We're certainly, facing that here in Florida, and just changing landscape when it comes to funding. So, I think organizations have to become more creative, more nimble, more resilient, more.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you. Andrea?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one, I'm super passionate about helping grassroots orgs, some who have never truly maybe even received federal funds or never got a shot at any of the big ones. But um, I think for me, fundraising is at a intersection between what is it going to look like for Gen Z and millennials. There's a huge generational shift as well with fundraising and direct mail maybe dying out, or maybe it's making a comeback, or really understanding how that wealth transfer is going to happen. And for my large orgs, it means also like changing the scarcity mindset that is all across the nonprofit sector with money, and understanding that like passion doesn't pay the bills, and your staff deserves to be paid well. Your programming needs to continue to be sustainable, and that also comes with funds. And the other reason why I'm here is because I love speaking about like every nonprofit needs funds. That's the first question as a consultant you get, and when you peel back the layers, there's so much more there. And with as Biggie once said, more money, more problems. And you have to make sure you have a strong foundational before doing fundraising. So I'm super passionate about how all of that plays into being creative, into, as Glenn said, staying nimble. And that also takes a lot of like looking within your organization into what makes you unique, what are you good at, and what does your networks allow you to do fundraising when in. And so yeah, that's why I'm here, because I love talking about this stuff.
Mm,
We
love
have
it.
to say the uncomfortable things out loud.
And the real stuff. I was just a guest on a podcast last week where she's collecting real stories from the sector. And I'm still like almost nervous that that episode's going to be released because it's a story that I experienced personally in fundraising that I've never told anyone. And so I think this kind of like it inspired me to kind of, yeah, like create more of this like honest conversation in our space on like what it's like to do this work, to have these this peer support, and to really talk about like what's actually working. And that's kind of my segue into this part of the conversation is we've all been kind of teaching this work and doing this work for over 20 years. There's a lot of that's a lot of experience in this room. We're not going to do that much math today. uh, but the best practices, I think, truly are still working. But which ones are those? And you mentioned all these other things in our environment, including AI and donors aging in different ways. And so, like, while there's so much change, we also want to know from you all, like, what are those best practices that is still working, or what are some stories that you're seeing or hearing around things today that maybe aren't those best practices, Glenn, that are things that like we would have never thought of 10 years ago plus in what's working in fundraising. So if someone really comes to you and says like, I need to raise money today, I don't really have extra time, extra capacity, or extra staff, like what do I do? What do you tell them, Glenn?
Well, let's just, let's name this, honestly, this is really, really tough. I was, we're running a class with some small nonprofit leaders here in Broward County, and I was just with them yesterday, and everyone's pulled in 100 directions. And I think, I think organizations have to really and when I say organizations, I also include the boards, have to
Mhm.
really be very intentional about return on investment. Somebody says, I need money right now. It's not another gala or fundraiser. It's not just a direct mail or email solicitation. It is having the conversations with people. In our class yesterday, one of the nonprofit CEOs was talking about, if I hope I get the story right, having recruited a new board member to her organization, and really taking the time to get to know this woman and what she was interested in, and helping her, provide those experiences so that she feels great and engaged, in her board service. And it's we have to take the time to do that. But then when it comes to the fundraising strategies, you have to look at those things um, that are going to, give you the highest um, return on investment. And that's one-on-one conversations with people. It's not another grant. It's not another pursuing a sponsorship from somebody. It's those conversations with individuals. We know that the vast majority of philanthropy in the United States comes from individuals.
Yep. Yeah. It's almost like the task is prioritization.
Yeah.
It's like we all got long lists, right? Andrea, you've got a family that you're running at. We're all running households. We're doing our jobs. We're doing multiple jobs. And there's a lot of similarities with also running an organization. Of course, there's a long list. It's really about how you're prioritizing your time and not like wishing for more time. It's how you're
Yep.
prioritizing it. What else would you add to that, Andrea, in terms of like, we need money right now. What do we do?
I'm gonna echo and just be straight up. Relationships not going away, and every nonprofit here is also gonna see a big tech shift with saying AI can handle your fundraising. And if you're an organization that jumps directly into that, people are gonna be able to tell. I say that relationship is not going to change. It's just how that happens may change, but when you have organizations who receive big checks, one is transparency and getting to know your donors. I tell people that big orgs literally have a prospect research whose job is to find out what makes this person with money give, what are their interests, where are they at, where they hang out, how do we get them to tour our facilities, how do we make an invite for a coffee chat. And so it doesn't come from an email that may be sent by a bot around like, hey, we're in deep dire of $200,000. Like the big checks are written through relationship. And so I think relationship might look different. Right now, we're seeing relationships being built through influencers and like how do you get your name out there and social media, but like relationship and being really transparent is something that I don't think it's going to change. Which echoes really what Glenn said around that. And so yeah, I just like, and then it comes together with prioritizing. You have to do the hard work to get the money, and that becomes taking out time out of your programming or merging it, right? Like if you know you're about to do a tutoring event or a programming, like don't be afraid to invite your two big donors from last year. See if they'll write another check by inviting them to come see your shadow, build the relationships, follow them on LinkedIn, stay up to date with what they're doing, make sure that the, development directors' jobs, like I feel like that's a big part that's unspoken, how much time they spend really building that relationship outside of your email campaigns, which, if they're also done right can be great. Um and then yeah, so and then with AI and the tech happening, just really be really careful because now you're gonna look like every other organization using AI to write things, and that's something I'm guilty of. So I'm speaking from experience, and reasons why we use it for ease or. I use it a lot because English is my second language, so the way I think doesn't always, come out the same way. But just go back and read it. Go back and read it and make sure it's actually expressing what you wanted to say. Make sure it's, segmenting. Like all these tactics are going to be there. I don't think they're going to change, but I think there's definitely ways of using it that is going to be different in the upcoming years.
Mm.
And to build on that, Andrea, I think people are becoming more and more sophisticated when it comes to AI writing. And I'm certainly seeing it. I get some email. I'm like, yeah, there's telltale signs that ChatGPT wrote this thing. And so I think it's fine in some writing, but when we're communicating with our donors, it has to feel human. And somebody, I was communicating with somebody on Substack recently, and I had said, that I went back and read an old essay that I wrote that had typos in it, and they said, yeah, typos are how you can tell that AI didn't write something. So typos
Oh,
have become important tools for us. So but I think we can't let AI replace the humanity in this work, because people give to people.
hmm
That's never going to change. It's never
hmm
going to change.
hmm I love it. I'm also hearing you both talk about essentially looking at your strengths. Like a lot of times when I meet nonprofits in this scenario, and everyone wants $1 million, by the way. Krista Berry would love $1 million. Feel free to send a check. Right. We all want $1 million, but that kind of like what's first and how do you prioritize it in a need? I'm hearing you both talk about how you're looking at your current assets and what your current board and donors are doing and going to them first and kind of building the relationship from there, where I think sometimes the thinking is the opposite, like, who don't I know? Let me go right to them. Who's going to give a random person on the street money? Like, you have to think about it for yourself. If you need to, borrow money, it's much easier to ask for $25 than, $2,000, right? Or $2,500. And so the difference there in what the ask is not only who you're asking. So you were talking about like go back to the people but it's also the story that you're telling as well, right? So we talk about storytelling all the time in fundraising. I know Luna does a lot of amazing content. If you all want to come back and do deeper dives, we have amazing curriculum and programs where you can dive deeper. But in the context of this conversation, what does good fundraising storytelling look like? If you have one, how do you know it's good? And is one story all you need to be able to essentially manage these times that are tough and stand out? Andre, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think storytelling, and I work with a lot of Hispanic or BIPOC led orgs, and one of the ways is staying authentic. Especially like if you are working with the Hispanic community, like do your reels in Spanglish, wear culture clothing around the community, like make representative of what the people that you help. And I think storytelling will always help. It should evoke a feeling, not always bad either. Like we've moved away from the always seeing like a child starving in the middle of nowhere to try to get funds. We don't do that, right? We show people for, who they are and tell their stories. But the number one is also transparency. Like protect them, but also really tell how if it's a story about you're fundraising for a specific campaign to help the unsheltered, like tell them more how they got there, like share about why your organization needs this money, where it's going. And I also like try to teach like, yeah, and you pay your staff. We've had this one person go through our case manager and all of that. Thank you. That's where the money went because it people had to do this work. So be transparent and people will see that. And like I said, evoking feelings and emotions. I always say, I've said this at many times now, and I still have not seen it. Send me a Spanglish newsletter, and I know
Mm.
that you'll make me want to donate to you because you are relating to me as a donor and as someone. And so, I've said this to someone like, oh, most of our donors are Jewish or we work with the Jewish community. Great. Have you considered sending some in Hebrew? Like, is that a thing? I don't know. Like,
Mm.
have you considered incorporating that into your work, segmenting again?
Mm.
So all of that goes back to how you communicate with people. I think it's really important to do that. If we look back at any organization, like the people who work there, the volunteers, or the people who donated, I saw this one story. They were Colombian. I'm Colombian. Like there's always some type of connection happening, and so you want to make sure you're staying authentic to those stories, and that's always what captures our attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Glenn, anything to add on terms of
Well,
storytelling for
two
fundraising?
thoughts, and I'll say I'm our two resident brilliant storytellers at Luna are in the room, so I'm feeling a little pressure here. But I think there's two things that come to mind. One is, and Andrea, you hit it, it's the humanity. So I see too many organizations just sharing data, and they're talking about outputs, not outcomes. Oh, we served 10,000 meals. That tells me nothing. How many, that's lovely. How many meals could you have served? How many meals needed to be served? So I think data has to be accompanied by a story, and a single story. And I will share. I'm not going to go into great detail, and anyone who's taken my classes has heard this, but I was working with a summer camp um, in Boston many years ago, that serves kind of inner city youth. And I met the founding camp director, and I asked her to tell me about the camp. And I'm not going to go into all the detail, but she told me a story of one young man who showed up on camp the first day, and the journey that he went on in that 2-week camp experience. And that story was exactly 4 sentences long. She had
Wow.
crafted this down to 4 sentences about this young man, not about the organization.
Hmm.
And at the end, she told me everything I needed to know about what this organization does. And it left me wanting to learn more, just from this kid who came to camp and had joined a gang, was involved in gang, and 2 weeks later he was no longer in the gang. And it was just so simple, so powerful, and left me wanting to know more.
Mm. Yeah. No, I love that. It sounds like taking the time to really personalize the story, especially if we're talking about building relationships, is
Yeah.
something that you're both, saying and being authentic. And I'm thinking like, okay, what's a practical next step? Like this would be a great exercise to bring back to your board, to your team, to like make sure that everyone has kind of their story of impact or why they're involved in the organization. Yeah, I think one story is more powerful often than a lot of data. However, Glenn, we're not clear from needing data in this sector either,
Oh,
right?
no, no,
Part of that, I love
no.
that you said that like the data and the story go together.
Yeah.
Um, Andrea, you're building a Philo fund around donor intelligence. And like, I want to talk a little bit about data because I think, yes, that high touch story of impact is important, but how should and can nonprofits be using data to be more successful at fundraising and or to really build their capacity to be ready for more fundraising down the road? Andrea?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about also like my donor behavior. And, I have a blessing and a curse that my skills rely on compliance in nonprofits. So whenever I hear about any nonprofit, I am reading their 990. You probably tearing it apart, looking at their board. Do they look like the communities they serve? What are their annual reports? What are they doing? And some people do that. It's like, oh, they pay too much. No, I want to make sure they're all paying equitably. I want to make sure this organization really has, their stuff in place, that they're being transparent, that it matches, what they're saying on their website to their finances. And so from that one, that's also a shifting power, because I'm doing the
Mm,
responsible thing as a donor to aligning my stuff, to the organizations I want to give. And that also means if it's too long for me to find it, you're gonna lose me. Like I should know, like we call them best practice. Your financial should be posted on your website. We call them best practice that you should, but like they really are could be the reason you may or may not get funds. Um,
mm,
and uh, and so I that's just the type of crazy donor I am. But once you got me, like I'm in your corner. I champion you,
yep,
and I'm an ambassador for you, because I've done my homework. And so
mhm,
again, and data goes beyond it. I want to make sure I work with a lot of grants and funders and people using AI to write grant applications and then not being able to deliver because AI will promise world peace with a $5,000 grant. And look, I've been shocked. There are funders who will accept those applications because they see potential in the leadership and the communities they serve,
Mhm.
but then they hit a block in reporting, and that's kind of where I come in sometimes too. And the reality is like, okay, why are you promising all this data that you don't even take? What data do you have? What data do you currently report on? Where is there places we can collect more data? How does that match with your qualitative, which is the storytelling? Like you can't measure joy. So have you gotten testimonials that match the data of whatever program you've done? And blending all of that together. And I think that, you know, um, that's where also the breakthrough comes, where it's not just the one who gave to your random social campaign. It's the one who wants to become a donor long term and be an ambassador for you and champion you throughout the journey of the organization. And so data is important. You should have it. It should be easy to find. It should be updated. Like, oh my gosh, if you took the plunge to put your financials, like, why am I only seeing 2022 stuff? You can't blame it on COVID anymore. Like, if put it out there, make sure your data is clear, make sure it matches what you're telling people. And I love that you all mentioned a story about this, like train your volunteers on your data, like have like a 30-minute video where they can find these resources, where they go through an onboarding, because those are the people you're going to put to run your dinner or your fundraising event, and someone's going to come up to them and they're not going to know what to answer. And it starts from everybody knowing the latest data. You do newsletters for your donors, do an internal one with updates from every team, make sure they're all up to date and caught up in the things going on in the organization and recently, because
Mhm.
they're also talking to you outside when they're going
Mhm.
to their stuff. Your employees are talking about you, about the work they do, and you want to make sure they're giving accurate information. But data, yeah,
Mhm.
data is should be a foundation of all your programming, of everything that you do throughout your organization, matched with the human component.
Yeah, so thank you. It sounds like there's like data on what you're doing and knowing what you're doing so that you can communicate in those stories, the impact and the outcomes that Glenn talked about. And there's also data on your donors and the people that are giving to you, right?
Mhm.
And the more that you know about the people that are giving, the more you can actually leverage all these to build these relationships, to ask for more
Oh yeah.
money and tell the stories. It all kind of goes together. Glenn, you've worked with
Oh
smaller
yeah.
organizations that may not have a lot of whatever that is, organizational capacity to manage all of this data. What are some of your tips or recommendations for organizations that are like, wow, yeah, we hear you, but I'm overwhelmed right now?
Um, well, I guess I would say, outside of whatever grantors might require of you, and I do think foundations and government grantors really need to reevaluate what they're asking for, and some of them are. But absent all that, keep it simple. I get that. You know, small organizations, are and the executive directors are pulled in 15,000 directions. Keep it simple, and if you get to control what data you're reporting on, find those data points that are best going to tell the story. And I'll echo what I said before. Make it about outcomes, not just about outputs. And a lot of people don't understand the difference
Yep.
between the two.
Yeah, I mean, and like this is another way we can kind of use AI and get better summaries of what these concepts are. I mean, there's great tools online. I know Luna has some. I know you can really kind of like find a lot of these tools to help you really build any kind of like programmatic outcomes uh, systems within your
Mm.
organization. And that really does lead me to the grants conversation, because I know I've seen it year after year. I'm hearing it when I go out in the community that our smaller orgs, or even some of our mid-sized organizations here, they're relying on these grants from foundations as a lifeline. And if you've like lost federal funding, or you're seeing that you're not going to be able to renew some of these foundations, it's like breaking my heart, honestly, for a lot of these organizations right now that haven't found a way to prioritize this diversification. Like, what are some of your advice for nonprofits that either think that that's the solution right now and are scrambling to try to get grant ready, or ones that have lost funding and are trying to kind of recover around this, reliance on one source, specifically foundation funds? What's your advice
Um,
for organizations right now? I heard you chime in, Andrea.
yeah, because I'm actually at a funder convening for one of my clients. So, I have a very interesting relationship with philanthropy because there is a huge power dynamic. They hold like 1.7 billion or trillion dollars in assets and only have to legally move 5% a year. And then they make you write these crazy grant applications to only give you some money. And so, I that doesn't mean I don't value their existence and what they've done to the sector. And I have amazing friends in the philanthropy space, but it is not the responsibility of funders, even though that's their title, to fund you. I think the organization has to be able to, have diverse revenue streams. And I people, there's a scarcity mindset of the word nonprofit as a whole, and people take it as like not profit, but that's not true. Some of the strongest nonprofits, which is the top 20, I think only the top 20% hold most of the, what you call it, like money in the sector. And so, at least for me, it's just come from a place where you can create a sustainable nonprofit. And that's not really grants to me. Most funders don't want to give long term, it's not a part of their mission or their design. They want to know that you have a formula of a program that works. They want to help you scale it. But like, that's why they ask you for your finances. That's they want to know if your board gives. Like, that's why they ask for all these things. And I think it's very rare to find a funder who wants just want to give you multi-year funding and wants to be a true partner of also operating funds, right? Because some will be like, oh, you can't spend it on salaries, but here's a bunch of money for you to do your programming.
With no
And
people.
so yeah. And so all that is to say to your question about grants, it's awesome that you get them. It's awesome that we want to apply. The money's there, so we should apply. We should definitely, it should be a percentage of your efforts and processes that you have grants as a part of it, but sustainably take care of your individual donors. Take care of, like, is there a way to monetize? You can sell the curriculum of your programs to other nonprofits. Like, there's so many creative ways for you to bring diverse revenue. I serve on the leadership council of a org who helps the unsheltered in Orlando, and they have shower trailers. When those trailers are not being used, they're being rented on events for revenue for the organization. And it's you have to be creative. You have to think outside of your box, of your scarcity mindset about this idea. But there are organizations doing it, and I think, if anything, that's what I'm more passionate. Yes, grants are real. Like, it's there. It's an opportunity. It should be a percentage of your
Mhm.
income, but like, don't forget about these other things that when everybody says, goodbye to private foundations or all these new things that are being created, like donor advised funds, at the core, who's going to save you? It's the community. It's the people locally. It's the people that you have in your newsletter, who have attended your events, who have toured, who have been passionate. So don't put them to the side and really invest in that relationship and the transparency with them. All that is to say, when writing your application, stay true to who you are. Avoid promising the world, because then that's more work for you too once you get the money. But yeah, I mean, I think grants are generally a good thing. I don't think they're going anywhere anytime soon. But definitely, make sure that you're not dependent on them, because it,
Mhm.
it really could break you on the long run.
Appreciate that. Glenn, I know you've worked with foundations and preparing organizations to be grant ready too. Any advice on this kind of balance of putting too many eggs in one pot, if you will?
Um, I think Andrea really kind of covered it.
Yeah.
Um, yes, we need diversification, and if you have access to foundation funding, great, go for it. But foundation funding, like government funding, comes with strings, comes with restrictions. The unrestricted dollars are where it's at. And I'm reminded of a Luna Live program we did last fall, Deb, that you moderated with a nonprofit founder in Sarasota, who has been buying rundown houses and rehabbing them and turning them into living spaces to get people off the street. And she's been enormously successful, beyond anyone's wildest dreams, and hasn't taken a penny of government or foundation dollars. It's all
Hmm.
been individuals.
Wow.
um, and
Love
and
that.
that and it's hard to make that shift off the grants to that. Okay,
Yes.
let's be
You need a
really
runway.
mindful of, you need a runway, and we don't always have it.
Right.
But that's the long-term success.
Mm-hmm.
And when you spend the time on those relationships and donors trust you, they will give you the unrestricted money. I
Yep.
worked for a law school once upon a time, and we had a donor who was giving us $150,000 a year, our biggest annual gift, and it was completely unrestricted because she
Mm.
trusted us.
Yeah. Right. It's the trust and building the relationships. The other thing I'm kind of hearing that's coming up for me as well as you all talk is being ready to compete for grants is also going to set you apart from any other ways that you're raising funds. And I keep thinking over and over again about the kind of finances piece. You've talked a lot about the other pieces of running the organization, and I just want to like lift up how important, and I've seen this years over the years of doing my work, that often the gap is folks work on telling their story and they learn how to create their theory of change to talk about outcomes, but if you're not able to actually like really look at a budget and write a budget, then you're asking people for money. I was just joking with I went and toured a space yesterday with some with a bank, and I'm like, it's such a critical skill. We have so much great content that exists here at Luna, but
Mhm.
also is coming out more. We've got our resident financial management expert on with us today too, and I really think that's a huge. If you have to prioritize something to really understand, Andrea said she goes right for the 990. For me too, I look at the finances, and you wouldn't think I'm like the creative, funky girl that like is probably such a people person. I am a people person, but I like to see the story in financials because that tells me where the organization is. And it doesn't matter how big the numbers are, it matters how you're communicating the numbers and showing that you know how to manage the numbers. Anyone's going to want to give more money, think about it, to someone that knows how to manage the money that they have today. Okay. So, really, it's not about the totals. And I know we were throwing out some statistics. It's around 92% of the entire sector in the US is under a million in annual revenue. Okay. So, that's all of you. And if you're larger than a million in annual revenue on here, awesome. We can all learn from you. But the truth is, the majority of the sector is still very small. So it's not the total number, it's how you're managing your dollars. So thank you for sharing some like real like quality stories and like tips on what's actually working. What about some like lessons learned? Like this is also like the honest hour, right? And I'm not saying that we need to like air out our dirty laundry like I did on that podcast last week. But what are some, I hate to like frame it in a mistakes. I like to be very much on like not scarcity, Andrea, as you talked about, and more around abundance. But are there things that we should avoid? Maybe we talk about it in terms of flags. Are there more yellowish flags that you're seeing when we're working with organizations that folks can kind of like narrow in on to focus on and fix? Is there anything else in terms of building sustainability that you were talking about? Glenn, I'll start with you, to help folks get out of this kind of like rat race scramble and give themselves some runway to really build a sustainable program. What have you seen in your work?
That's a really big question.
I know.
um, I and I'm not quite sure how I want to approach this, but let me start with this. And Andrea, you touched on something before that needs to be amplified, is transparency. And Andrea, you said, you're a numbers person. You're looking for their 990. Make that easy. Don't put links to your 990s and your audits on your website. Don't make people go to Candid. Don't make people ask for it. Put it right there. But I also think that this transparency is important internally and with boards.
Mm.
Anyone who knows me knows that I am the anti-event fundraiser. I never met a gala I didn't want to kill off. And we're not honest with ourselves and with our boards about some of these things.
Mm.
And case in point, very few organizations, and Andrea, you probably see this, don't track the cost of staff time when they're doing ticketed fundraising events. I'm not talking about donor gatherings or things like that. Events designed to raise money. And so boards don't get the real picture on this. The
Mm.
organization doesn't get the real picture on this. When you factor that piece in, it changes the numbers dramatically.
Mm.
So I think we've got to be honest about this. And I think boards have to be honest, and boards, have to understand that this is not the way to raise money these days. Maybe it is in an
Mm.
organization's early days. And I get why boards like to do events because they're easier, they're less threatening, they're intellectually accessible. But I've never met an executive director who loves doing galas. Uh, I'd like to
And
meet
there's like
some,
a
and get a
socialite
therapy
kind of
session with them.
like thing with the events. I know, with I worked in San Diego for years and I used to call it like, the philanthropy of the socialites. Like they felt good coming outside and putting their outfits on because they were like doing good, right? But it was really more around gathering. And so if we kind of like think about that as like building community, right? Which is maybe more authentic to a lot of the work that we do and not just like doing an event for a board to feel good about
Yeah.
themselves. It can often look performative, but if we flip the script on it and think about it, to your point, Glenn, around building relationships, and you're our stewardship guru here at Luna too, around like really building that stewardship and that relationships with board. They're going to bring their friends. That's the fastest
Yeah.
way to prospective new donors is with the current donors. And I've been teaching prospecting for years, and everyone comes because they're expecting like the magic wand. You know this, Glenn. And I'm like, sorry. The answer is it's within what your organization exists already. And we
Yeah.
can assess that as consultants and educators pretty quickly, how effective that is. And so, Glenn, like, what is that for board? Does that mean they need to like fire some board members? Do they need to recruit new board members? Like, what's the like quick 90-day like solution to make your board more effective?
Well, it's it starts with the transparency.
Okay.
I think board composition is very important. I'm a big believer in term limits. We had this just
Mm.
conversation in our class yesterday that board members who've been around for 20 or 30 years, just hanging on, and they're not making room for fresh ideas and fresh approaches.
Mm.
Um, I'll suggest to everybody and who's attending today. Last month we had a great Luna Live session on multi-generational boards.
Hmm.
So important, and you have to look at board composition. If your board is all 60 and 70-year-olds, you've got a problem.
Mm.
You need the 30 somethings, you need the 40 somethings, you need people of different generations. Because Andrea, as you said, there are shifts in how people give. And I'll go back to the gala thing. I'm not so sure the 20 and 30 somethings of today ever will want to go to galas. I hope they die off. They are responding to direct mail. Direct mail is actually not dead, but
Mm.
but 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 we just have to be honest about these things. And I'm doing some work with a small nonprofit in the art space, and the two founders are getting tired, and they have this board. Uh, they're doing most of the work, and they're very young organization. And I asked, I went around with the board. We did a retreat a couple of weeks ago, and I asked, how they came to be on the board, and half of them were there because of the founders.
Mhm.
Yesterday in our class, one of our participants is a CEO, said the board is mostly made up of his friends and family. That's a problem. And Krista, you also I'm diverting a little bit here. You use the word community, and this
Mhm.
is something that I have been thinking about a lot lately. People in general are hungry for community. There's so much
Mhm.
division. There's so many things separating us.
Mm.
People are hungry to come together, and I think that's what nonprofits have to really start thinking about. It's just not how do we get more donors, but how are we engaging them? How are we retaining them? How are we building community? Because that's, and there's that great quote from Margaret Mead, that basically says, never underestimate how a small group of people can change the world, because it's the
Mm.
only thing that ever has. And so, think about whatever space you occupy in the sector. You're working on food insecurity, you're working in child literacy, building a community of people that starts with your board, and includes your donors, includes your volunteers, includes everybody. Everyone's got something to give.
Mhm.
That's what a culture of philanthropy is. Everyone's got something to give.
That's beautiful.
Time, treasure, talent,
Mm.
and that community has to start with the board. It has to start with the representation on that board, and how that board reflects the community that you're trying to build, not just the community in which you live, but the community you're trying to build.
It's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
That means a lot for a lot of the issues that we're all working in and care so much about. Andrea, what's a reflection or a mistake or some of your, kind of thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, so I want to echo to the board. I work with a lot of again, Hispanic led orgs, and they're still the cousins, the primas that they put, and I'm just like, absolutely not. That's what I talk about. Like, I need funds, but then I take a look at your board and they're not composed of the people who can get you those funds. And it explains a lot of it.
See
But
that
to the red
again.
flags, it has to do what Glenn said in the beginning. You need to know the true cost of your work. If I my first question is someone is like, oh, I feed the homeless on Saturdays or whatever, and I want to run a nonprofit. Someone told me I should open a nonprofit because that's how it starts. And then I'm like, great, how much does it cost you to feed those people, including your time, if they were paid, any volunteers, take the receipts from Sam's, the materials, the prepping. If you paid yourself a good living wage, $35, $45 an hour, your two volunteers who help part-time, like, tell me the cost of those 100 people you served. And honestly, it's probably easier if I had just gone to McDonald's and bought Happy Meals for all those 100 people based on
And
your
starting an
cost of expense for doing that, than starting a whole organization. And
yeah,
I
or
and I'm
donate to one that
I
exists.
I leave people like really shocked when I ask them, like, what's the cost per person of your, you help entrepreneurs launch businesses. Great. What's the cost of your program per person? From the beginning, you build the curriculum, to the people who deliver, to the free coach who came and delivered a session. Like, imagine if that was paid, right? And all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, this is in thousands of dollars. And that's why we can never catch up. And so, yeah, the yellow red flag to me is not knowing the true cost that it takes for you to have, oh, you run a scholarship program, or you take kids all the way through higher education. Great. 4 years from freshman to they get accepted to university. What is the cost per head of a child? Including everything, including the rent of the place where they went to take your workshops,
Yep.
including the swag bag that you give them at the end of graduation in case you don't find a sponsor. Oh, we
Right.
get sponsors. Great. Imagine that company gets sold and don't sponsor you anymore, and then it comes out of your employees' wages, so it's just like, know the true cost of your program.
Mm.
And that is also something that gets you grant ready. Funders know when you're guessing, oh yeah, we can get rent for $5 a month. Unless you have an explanation that someone's renting you something for $5 a month, they know that's not a realistic budget. Or, they understand, many funders, they do tend to give local, so they already know the expense of doing this program. They've been looking at applications for years. And so, yeah, not knowing the true cost of your program inside and out, without, with like the cost, the expense of running your
Mhm.
program successfully is really what's important. And then that helps with transparency. Now you can say, we have a goal of this much, so we can graduate 10 students in 4 years, watch their trajectory here because of what we raised, like
Yeah,
that's
it's
the
good.
kind
Do
of
the math, right?
communication.
Like
Yeah,
that's what
that's the type of communication I'm looking for. And that tells me that you really took into consideration, what is going to make your program also be here longer. Because if not, like, the Mean Girls comparison of you get hit by the bus, your program might not be here anymore. So like,
well,
how
there's
is
some truth to that
yeah,
right now.
And
It's
you know,
yeah, yeah,
Andrea, you said you just said something that's really important, and that's the true cost. And okay, we can graduate 10 students. You know, that is important for your storytelling with your individual donors.
Mhm.
Because if you know what that cost is, and you're sitting down with somebody who is a has money to give, that data point puts it in context. Because if
Totally.
I'm the donor and I say, okay, it's going to cost $5,000 to get this kid through high school, all right, I could give you $5,000, but that's one kid. But you know what? I've got the capacity to give you $100,000. So the
Yes.
donor gets to see the impact that they can have. They can see, because most people, when they're giving money, they want to be part of something bigger than themselves. They want to see what they can accomplish.
Mhm.
So that puts it in context. I want to say something else, and I'm not backtracking on what I said about not going after grants, and here's what everyone on the call should do: use ChatGPT or AI of choice, and have it give you a checklist of what you need to do to be grant ready. Whether you go after grants or not, that's a discipline. And being grant ready is going to help you run your business, talk to your donors. It's a great process to go through. I did that
Yeah.
with one of my clients. We brought in a consultant, and they were not at all grant ready, but it gave
Mhm.
them a roadmap. They knew what they needed to do. They knew what they needed to become, whether
I
they go
love that
down that path or
exercise.
not.
Glenn, because I think you just also gave another example of how being like grant ready is also being ready to storytell, to do a individual giving campaign, to ask a major donor,
Yeah.
frankly, to invite us to the board. I mean, we're on this call, we're folks that are regularly invited to boards. And I hate to say it, but I regularly decline. It's true. Because I also don't want to necessarily be on certain boards, that aren't ready for what I can give as well. Okay. So there's also just like lots of readiness that need to happen with a lot of you smaller organizations to either even engage pro bono folks that want to
Mhm.
help you and give back. So all of this stuff is so important. And I loved how you brought it all back around to how they're all interconnected. Because a lot of times when we think about like what's working now, we tend to kind of silo our own roles and our work, thinking like, okay, I got to do this one thing. But actually, the opportunity right now is to look much more holistically, is what I'm hearing you both say. Not only like your assets, it's almost doing like an assessment of how your organization is doing right now, and use some of these new innovative tools that we have, like a chat gpt. I'm a Claude user personally. There's a whole area in Claude that they're creating for nonprofits, and so you can go in and kind of see some of the connectors and see if there's some tools in
Mm.
there that work for you. But use these innovative tools to kind of actually help you think, like be more of your strategist and what you need to help prioritize, because they're all interconnected. You can't just do one thing, write a good story without thinking about how the financials are going to be
Mm.
connected to that. Our honest hour is running out of time. Maybe we need to do honest 90 minutes, but we're there. Folks are still listening, which I appreciate. And I want to give each of you a minute to kind of sum up, like how you feel about this conversation, and maybe think about if there's like a mindset shift that you'd like folks on this call to think about and make for their organization around raising money that actually works. What would that be? Andrea, I'll start with you.
yeah. Thank you for having me. I'm very passionate about all this, and I love being with other professionals as well. Yeah, let's take away the scarcity mindset from the work we do so that we can build something long term and successful. And then I leave you all with, kind of this one thing we talked about, segmenting, knowing your donors. Like, go through your social media, Meta Business Suite, your Give Butters of the world, and see if you know the ages of the people who follow you, give to you. There's a lot of demographic data. You should be able to answer, oh, look, we appeal to women between the age of 25 and 45 in this particular area. Like, you should be able to understand who are the people that support and follow you and what does it look like. And one, continue to cater to them, but be like, oh, we should probably be also like doing messaging in language and fundraising and making invites to males who are, whoever your general demographic. So that's one tool I live you with, because you have some of the data and a lot of the tools you use every day, because that ultimately helps you with your messaging and around fundraising. But my takeaway too is, don't come from a place of abundance, even though it's hard in this economy. But you need to build something sustainable long term. And that's the kind of confidence that you also need when you're making the ask, honestly.
Yeah.
So many orgs have amazing storytelling, and not once do they say, don't forget to keep our work going. Here's our donate button. You got to make the
Mm,
ask too. You got to make sure you're
mhm.
asking, or those mouths don't get fed. So you want to make sure you're tying that back to how they can continue to support you. But that's it. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Andrea. Glenn, how would you like to leave us? Close out what's working or what's a mindset shift for folks?
Occurs to me over the last hour, we've talked very little about fundraising strategy and tactics. And I'm glad that we didn't go down there, because we could certainly go down that rabbit hole. I think you have to come at this with intentionality. And I love, Andrea, getting out of the scarcity mindset. There's a lot of money out there. There are a lot of people out there, no matter what community and where you are. It is out there. People are hungry. They want to be in community. They want to solve problems. And especially going back to the younger generations, we know they are organization agnostic. They're trying to solve problems. So have that mentality of abundancy. If you're an executive director, if you're a development director, give yourselves the gift of time to think, to reflect, to study, to read, to plan, and then pursue from there, because that's what I think these times call for. And I'll leave this with this, and some of the people on the call have heard me say this. I was at a conference last fall, and the CEO of the National Council of Nonprofits was there. This was October of 2025, and she said, the nonprofit of 2024 is gone and is never coming back. And I think the sooner we all recognize that and accept that and embrace that, the better
Mhm.
off we're going to be. Federal funding is not going to come bouncing back. We are still, dealing with anti-DEI forces out there that are trying to tear down the work that so many of us are trying to do. We and again, that quote, never let a good crisis go to waste. This is an opportunity for this sector to start doing things we should have been doing all along. I was hopeful during the pandemic that maybe some organizations would wake up, but we've just kind of bounced back to the same old galas and golf tournaments. We've got to take the time. We have to think differently. This sector needs to be shaken up, and we have to do the shaking.
Mm. Wow, so
So
powerful. Thank you both so much for your energy. It's true. We could have another fundraising honest hour just on strategy and tactics, and maybe we will.
let's do
Up,
it.
up next month, we've got storytelling on and data on coming up. I don't know exactly what those topics are, but know that they're coming. We're going to talk more about storytelling. We're going to talk more about data in the next few months. And if you have any other topics that you want to submit to us, please engage in the community. We're always looking for your feedback in community. You can reach out to us. Deb is always active in there. And thank you to our guests for being here. We appreciate you all. Keep doing the hard work and keep showing up for your communities. Take care, anyone.
Thanks, everybody.